Now, many arts organisations are increasingly reliant on business sponsorship to stay afloat. But does a fat cheque do more to boost a corporate's image than help a cash-strapped gallery's bank balance? Some are now demanding the arts stop accepting money from big banks and oil companies. And to prove that point, protesters have stormed the British Museum. Here's our culture and digital editor, Paul Mason.
Sunday at the gallery or museum has become a British institution, but it's now becoming a battleground. It's normal now to see big corporate sponsorship at museums, art galleries and theatres. And in its wake, something else is becoming normal too. Protest, as the Viking exhibition at the British Museum is about to find out.
Come hither, mortal humans, as we tell a tale of Ragnarok, the end of the world, for 'tis coming soon.
It's not clear at first if the punters realise it's a protest so well as it done. The protesters' target is BP, which is sponsoring the official Vikings exhibition. Just like the Vikings, the protesters maraud a bit, sing songs, and eventually eject themselves.
What we would like these arts institutions to do is to drop the oil sponsorship completely, because it is providing them with a greenwash veil of deceit that makes them look like they're doing good in the world when they're actually wreaking havoc and devastation across the planet.
I have of late been much maligned for my oil-seeking exploits.
And it's not just museums. Protesters have disrupted performances by the Royal Shakespeare Company, also sponsored by BP, and say they'll go on until the arts establishment rethinks.
So unnatural as British Petroleum.
Now they have an ally in a major figure in British theatre who thinks they're right.
It's about a brand, it's about an image, and often it's maybe in other areas, particularly if you've had something like a massive oil spill affecting a whole coastline, you've got an image problem. So then your name can also be attracted to theatre projects, working with young people or in different parts of the community. It's a way of starting to rinse, to wash, to cleanse your tarnished brand.
This Trojan shot!
Ravenhill's work is often controversial. This in-your-face adaptation of Troilus and Cressida at the RSC was part of a season sponsored by BP. I ask him, does the issue of sponsorship arise backstage?
If 2 or 3 actors found themselves alone in a green room over a coffee machine for 5 or 10 minutes, they might whisper a few doubts about, isn't there something very contradictory about what we're doing on the stage and the context of the corporate funding around it. But actually there is a real climate of fear. I mean, most people in the world that I know, the theatre, are on very short-term freelance contracts. So everybody's very scared to stick their head above the parapet.
Following yesterday's protest, the British Museum, in a statement, told us it is exceptionally grateful to BP for their loyal and ongoing support. It is only possible to develop and host temporary exhibitions like the Viking one with this kind of external support. BP, which signed a £10 million deal to sponsor 4 big arts organisations in 2011, told us BP is a proud supporter of the arts in the UK. Its investment in long-term partnerships represent one of the most significant long-term corporate investments in UK arts.
No more losing! No BP!
But the issue is not going away. With a 7% funding cut to the arts last year, this kind of thing may be coming to a museum, gallery or theatre near you.
No BP! No BP!
Well, I'm joined now by filmmaker and environmental campaigner Sheila Menon and the arts and culture writer Kate Maltby. Sheila first, 10 million quid sponsorship from BP, indeed. Where else are museums going to get that money from in these straitened times?
These arts institutions are extremely popular, high-level international brands. They've got amazing fundraising teams.
Oh yes, but there's a 7% funding cut to the arts this year.
There is a 7% funding cut, and we are completely empathetic. I mean, I'm personally very empathetic with the challenges that they're facing.
Well, you're not. You're disrupting their exhibitions.
The fact is that the threat that we're facing through the effects of climate change is far, far greater. And by accepting these sponsorship deals, they're actually supporting the climate change threat
So you want the taxpayer to cough up 10 million quid, do you?
Currently, the British Museum, about a third of their annual income is generated through taxpayers' money already. The amount of sponsorship money that they receive from BP is actually less, and this is from BP's own figures, is actually less than 0.5% of their annual income. It's a myth that people generally believe that these arts institutions cannot survive without this money, and it's a complete myth. Actually, that's part of the PR deceit that the oil companies want to maintain.
Kate Maltby? Is that true?
Well, obviously, companies like BP tend not to be responsible for the core funding, the long-term everyday funding, the sort of the toilet paper in the loos. What they do is they sponsor big-name gold star exhibitions like the BP Portrait Award. So I think if you were to cut down on all corporate sponsorship, you wouldn't see a sort of decline in all of these museums. What you'd see is a loss of star exhibitions, the blockbuster exhibitions that people actually want to come go to. But Sheila, I'm not quite sure what you're actually suggesting here, because I don't know if your target are all corporate organisations sponsoring the arts, or specifically oil? Is oil particularly evil, or should we be taking all profit out of the arts?
Sheila?
Specifically oil company sponsorship that we're talking about here.
So you don't have a problem with big banks sponsoring?
I think there are ethical choices that can be made. People didn't. I mean, it wasn't believed that the sports industry would be able to cope without the tobacco sponsorship money, but it's a thriving industry, and
that's a good point about tobacco.
But you seem to be deciding what is ethical and what is not ethical. You've just said actually it's oil companies that you don't like because you personally think are they worse than arms companies? Are they worse than tobacco companies?
I think our arts institutions are already making ethical choices to not accept arms funding, to not accept funding from tobacco companies, to extend those ethics to not accept money from oil companies really isn't that far greater a step.
And you'd like to extend it to banks, would you? Personally, I think the banking industry definitely has ethical issues, and what I'd like to see is our arts institutions acting with ethics rather than acting as a PR vehicle for companies to continue to perpetuate devastating operations around the world and maintaining human rights and environmental abuses around the world. Kate, be honest, this is more, the corporates get more out of this than they're putting in terms of laundering their image. I mean, when you look at BP's profits, £1.9 billion profits they've just announced, 10 million quid is a drop in the ocean, isn't it? It's just small change that makes them feel better.
Why should profit always be a bad word? I mean, again, this is taking this to all corporations that make money as opposed to specific oil companies. I don't think that companies like BP sponsor purely to launder their image. I think they do it because the bigwigs at the top like to be flattered. I think, they did it because Lord Brown liked to go to the opera. I mean, those may not be the most valid reasons in the world, but frankly, I don't think that the BP Portrait Award changes anyone's mind about the Deepwater Horizon spill whatsoever, and I don't think even BP kids itself that it does.
Kate Maltby, Sheila Menon, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you.